All right. Hi, my name is Chris Long. I run the newspaper at Manhattan High, the MHS Mentor, and I'm going to be moderating this town hall today. I'd like to start by thanking all the candidates that were able to make it tonight. So we extended offers to all of the candidates, and these four were able to attend, and we really appreciate you guys making the time. I'd also like to thank the AMS Community Center for allowing us to host this for free, and our MHS Video Production for live streaming this event. And we appreciate everyone in the audience for coming tonight. And I'm going to let our two other moderators introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Jackson Byerly, and I'm the president of Young Republicans.
And I'm Sam DeLong, and I'm the president of MHS Democrats.
And they're going to be asking our follow-up questions today. And so if we would just want to go starting with Hagemeister down, introducing yourself.
And just to be clear, are you just wanting an introduction?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Carla Hagemeister, and I'm one of the board candidates, and I'm currently sitting on the USD 383 Manhattan-Ogden Board of Education.
Hi, I'm Jamie Morris Hardiman, running for school board.
Hi, I'm Teresa Parks, also running for school board.
And I'm Stephen Rusin, and I am surprisingly also running for school board.
Okay. So we're going to start with our pre-written questions. We have 6 of them now. Candidates will be given 2 minutes to respond to these questions, and then Sam and Jackson will ask follow-up questions. They have 1 minute to respond to the follow-up questions, if there are any. And yeah, okay. So the first one.
I'm going to, just
sorry.
for our clarity, is there a 30-second warning, or are you guys timing it and we get?
I can give you a 30-second warning if
That
you'd
would
like.
be wonderful, I think,
Okay.
for all of us.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep,
Cool.
sorry.
All right. We're going to start with Hagemeister, and then we will rotate who starts. So we have different people going first. All right. So the first question is, the Kansas Department of Education recently announced an endeavor to include more soft skills, things such as professionalism, verbal communication, and career readiness in the curriculum. How would you like to see these things implemented in USD 383, and how should the school balance them with traditional academics?
I think that Manhattan High School and all of our USD 383 schools are already implementing a lot of those efforts through our character building programs that we have and all of our social emotional learning that we're discussing in our schools. Students using problem-based learning, students working together, students working on a number of different projects and efforts, all really comes together to make those things happen. Our elementary schools are all working through different character development programs, and that's essentially what those are, is building those traits that we want in our young people as they enter into the workforce. And those are certainly skills that are important no matter what field our students go into, whether it's into post-secondary, into college environment, or a trade, or straight into the workforce. I think those are all good skills for students to have, and really are empowering for students to learn those skills at a young age and have a chance to practice them while they're in school and while they have that support of their parents and their teachers. So,
yeah. Okay. Jamie?
Thanks. So what Chris is talking about is the Kansas CAN project that the Kansas State Department of Education has been doing for the last 6 years, where they've been going around and talking to businesses around the whole state to see what it is that they're looking for in employees. And what they're finding is that businesses, by and large, want to see more focus on soft skills than on academics. That's not to say that academics aren't important. They're incredibly important. But when you come to work for someone, they're more concerned with, can you get along with other people? Can you show up at work on time? Can you be responsible? Than they are, do you know calculus, right? They want you to be able to learn. They want you to come with the knowledge of how do you learn new information. That's what's really important to the employers. I think soft skills are important for a lot of reasons. More than anything, the fact that it's really hard to learn when you're stressed. We know that from brain development, right? There's some really interesting research on how the brain functions that shows that if you're in a stressed state, the part of your brain that actually does learning disengages. So when you have kids that are coming to school that are hungry, or they've had a hard time at home the night before because there was domestic violence, or maybe they're just stressed out about a test, your brain has disengaged at that point. So including things like mindfulness, activities that have to do with social emotional learning help people to be better learners while they're at school. And that to me is why we have the focus that we do already in our district on social and emotional learning.
Yep, Teresa.
So, as a career professional, it is really important for me to stress the importance of those soft skills or transferable skills, as we call them. Most employers are able to train you in their specific skill set for the job, but very few employers have training for timeliness, courtesy, multitasking, being able to think outside the box creatively, being able to initiate action. And so these skills are something that most employers are wanting these employees to come ready-made for. So we think that it's really important for us to stress those soft skills, for us to be able to help you to develop those soft skills, and to be able to find a way to put some of that into more curriculum-based learning so that it's not something that you guys are surprised by once you get out into the workforce. You've already been doing it, and it needs to start early. Like Jamie said, this is not something that we want to wait till it's your senior year to help you start learning about soft skills. This is something we want you to develop throughout your scholastic career. So I think it's very important that we focus on those, as well as, let me just say that, don't skip math. But what I do want you to do is start practicing. Those are skills that you can start practicing daily while you're in your daily function there at school. So it's very important, and I'd love to see us give a little bit more focus towards that.
I do programming, so programmers and tech people are not necessarily known stereotypically for their social skills. But I think one of the things that is underemphasized is grammar. I think a lot of people, like, we live in a day and an age where people are limited to a certain number of characters in a tweet, where we focus on these LOL and LMAO and whatever the acronym is in order to express ourselves. And that kind of thinking, that short thinking, leads itself to a lot of people not understanding grammar as well. We have autocorrect, we have Grammarly, whatever the programs are that replace those skills. A little bit the way calculator has replaced a lot of people's way to do math in their head. I think grammar is something that's underrepresented in that, and I think that people are spending all their time interfacing with phones, computers, and not really talking with each other as much, not having deep and long conversations with people, are some of the culprits for why we see this decline in those soft skills. So I'd like to see classes focus on grammar more so, and then also just holding people accountable. I know timeliness, getting to class, being in attendance, we have to enforce those rules in the schools, which means if you're late, you get written up or whatever the policy is. And by enforcing those, we don't let people slack through those skills. We reinforce that those skills are important, and we can do that from any age in any
30
class.
seconds. Cool. All right, question.
Okay, so this is a follow-up directed towards basically everybody, because I felt as if your answers were similar enough and favorable towards soft skills, right? I know it's hard for high school students to kind of, I guess, put to words what they see as an implementation of that. Like, it's true that we're all in favor of soft skills being continued, right? But if you have ideas on how to incorporate that so that the high school students in the audience understand a little bit more what that, like, impact on their curriculum is going to look like, right?
Could we start with Hagemeister and then go through?
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure. I'll think on the spot now. I think that our direction towards personalized learning is a good descriptor of that. And your guys' experience with Canvas last year and with hybrid and remote learning really was a trial by fire and a really hard lesson in that. It is those opportunities for you guys to manage your time. You knew what assignments were, you knew when they were due, hopefully, and you had to navigate that. Many of you as high school students had the first opportunity to really have to send a directed communication to an instructor, and that was hard. I looked at an email that my now graduate son was going to send to a teacher and cringed. I looked at the email that my seventh grader was sending to a teacher and cringed, because even coming out of our home, the communication that she was having was not what I consider to be appropriate for an email going to a respected elder. And so we had those learning opportunities in our implementation last year. And you guys, I think, all grew. That was something that I did hear from folks that were coming to our board meetings. Some of our students said, I really learned how to advocate for myself. You guys increased your communication skills through that really hard time last year. And I think looking at those opportunities, that personalized learning, that ability to take your passion and then go with it and communicate with your instructors about what it is that you want to do is part of what we're looking for in those soft skills.
Jamie?
Thank you. So I agree with Carla on last year for sure. I have an 8th grader now, so 7th grader last year, who did remote learning. And he definitely had to learn how to advocate for himself in a way he never had before. And learning about deadlines. I mean, I felt like last year he was in college. He got up at 7:42 and he was on his class for 5 minutes and he went back to bed, and then he got back up when it was time for the next class, and he did his homework in between. I mean, it felt like he was in college, and it was really good for him to have that experience. I think so much of where you learn soft skills is in your extracurricular activities. And I love how our high school offers so many different activities to be involved outside the classroom. That to me is a huge place where you learn those skills. But it's also through things like group projects, which I know a lot of people hate. I always hated group projects because I ended up doing all the work. But I think those are a great opportunity to learn. So it's not necessarily incorporating a different curriculum. It's making sure that teachers are including projects in their classrooms that allow you to practice those skills.
Hello. All right, so I think that some of those soft skills training is something that can be incorporated into already present curriculum. When it comes to even being able to do a proper professional introduction, you would be surprised by how many people get to college and don't know how to give a proper professional introduction. So that's something that we can be working on in, English class or in your speech classes. Those are things that we can help you guys develop while you're still in high school so that you're ready once you get into that transition period. So for me, working in the Career Center at K-State, that's part of what I put into my training when it comes to the employment readiness, is making sure that they know how to sell themselves as an asset to a potential employer. And that's what I think we need to focus on when it comes to some of those skills. Put those into some of the English curriculum. Put some of that into the speech curriculum, and that's going to help you guys be able to be prepared for that.
Most of what I was going to say has just been said, so I won't take up too much time, but I'd like to highlight Jamie's point with extracurriculars in particular, specifically extracurriculars that get you interacting with other people and preferably people that aren't already part of your peer group. So being able to interface with companies or somebody, maybe even just adults, outside of the school environment is going to get that training to you. And I had a part that I agreed with Teresa on too, but I forgot which one that was. So everything she said was awesome. Yep.
We'll go with that.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to the second question now. And this one will start with Jamie. Okay, so how would your presence on the board support Afghan refugees as they integrate into our school system, and how can you apply those ideas to integrating international, ESOL, and ethnically diverse students as a whole?
Okay, it's a great question and very timely. Carla and I spent a couple hours this weekend with Emily Cherms, who does this work for the district at the district office. It was great to get her ideas on what's happening right now. I think with a lot of this, we trust the staff, right? We hire people to do these jobs. We need to trust them. I think as a community member, I'm certainly doing what I can to help with Afghan families that are coming. There's a resettlement team that's in place right now. I've donated to that. So asking people to do things like that within the schools, I think could be great. Trying to have projects where extracurricular group takes on the project of collecting kitchen items for new families that are coming to our community, right? Those things can all be useful. So looking at ways for everybody in the community to give back to new people that are coming and be welcoming to them. I think that there are a lot of needs in our district right now for staff, particularly paraeducators, right? We have a lot of open paraeducator positions. So one of our big discussions with Emily was how do we get more people into the classroom who maybe are from the communities that the language is different, right? If we have people who are here at K-State who have a different language, could we ask them to come be a para for part of the day even? Can we do part-time paras to be able to bring people into the schools that speak that language as a native? I think that's one way to start thinking outside the box. I think it's great to think about how do we engage families. who don't feel comfortable in our schools because they're new to America or they're new to this community. And there, again, a lot of discussion about how do we help families to feel engaged. So I think that's incredibly
30 seconds.
important.
Oh,
Thanks.
Well, I was actually going to say one of the things that you said, so I'm not trying to be like you, Steve, but the other thing that I would add to that is giving them a support system within that school, making sure that they have a peer mentor or someone that they can connect with that can help them acclimate to our, we're so different from Afghanistan. And so it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for some of them. And so we want to make sure that we're being active about addressing those things and providing them with some solutions and support. I think that's going to be really helpful for them. I was a military brat, so we moved like every 3-4 years whenever, we got restationed. And learning to make friends and learning to socialize, every school, even in this country, was different, had a totally different atmosphere. So it's going to be really important for them to have that support system and to know who's going to be some contacts for them to be able to utilize if they need to.
My sister teaches ESL, and anytime you're trying to teach somebody who's not a native English speaker, that causes real problems with them understanding the lessons, understanding where they are. And from that, a lot of kids, when they don't understand part A of a chapter or, say, a math equation, when you get to part B, well, they didn't understand part A. So, it's just this cumulative effect where somebody, sorry, I'll get back to the point. I think getting English teachers, getting people that can help them understand our culture and our language is going to be the biggest issue. And once we can get them to that understanding, then we can really start providing the rest of that education. But in effect, I think English is going to be the biggest issue, and that'll probably mean, I don't know exactly how many we're bringing over, but we'll need to account for that in our teachers that we're hiring, that we're going to have those extra struggles and those extra, bulge of students in that category. So I think getting the culture, getting the English is probably the first step that we need. And that'll take place at every level of education as well. We'll have, not everybody's going to come in as a kindergartner or a third grader.
30 seconds.
Oh, thank you. So I think we need to be aware of that, and we need to figure out how to create a game plan to get them on board in such a way that we don't lose all of those years.
I think that when we're talking about our families that are coming to us from Afghanistan, there's multiple layers that we need to be looking at. We're not just talking about the language differences. We also, in reality, need to be remembering that there's been a lot of trauma for those families. A few years ago, we had a large group of families come to us through a K-State program from Saudi Arabia. And a lot of those families ended up at, their elementary school kids were very pocketed at Marlette, which I think was a really neat experience for that school. But those kids and those families were coming because they had a plan. They knew they were coming, they knew where they were going to live, and they had a support system already in place. The families that are coming to us from Afghanistan are coming to us from all different experiences, and many of them are coming with nothing. So we have to be prepared for not only the language issues that are present, but also just the upheaval that's happened in their lives. We don't know specifically what schools they'll be at, so there's a really good chance that those resources are going to be spread very thin. In our conversation with Emily this weekend, you have a chance to talk with any of our ESOL staff. It's a good time. It's a good experience. They have just a desire to learn more every day. Emily talked about the need to have cultural brokers, to have people within our community who want to be that bridge for our families, helping them with things across the board, not just the basics of a person in the classroom with them, but also, do you need help filling out this form? Do you need help in transportation? Or how can we get you to be and feel part of this community? And I think our district is really walking into this well-seated because of the previous experiences that we've had, such things as we're taking our enrollment process for these students down to paper. We're not expecting them to do it online in the same way that we expect our families that have English as a first language, because it can be overwhelming. So it's a willingness for us to look at different ways to do it.
Cool. Do we have any follow-up questions? You make a good point. Okay. So third question, we're going to start with Teresa. So culturally responsive teaching and learning was a contentious topic this summer. Please answer all three parts of this question. If a similar bill to last summer came up while you were on the board, would you vote for it? Yes or no? On principle, do you support teaching CRTL to students in the classroom or in professional development? And please explain your answer.
So I think that a lot of the kerfuffle when it came to the CRTL was misunderstanding and people not really knowing what it was that the school district was trying to do with that. So yes, I would definitely vote for something that is more inclusive and allows people to feel like they belong in their school atmosphere. Second part? What was the second part of that?
Teaching is.
Oh, something similar. Yes?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Was it? Yes, yes, I would. And part of the reason why is because when you think about different cultures that people come from, there's different ways that they do everything from socializing to learning to even prepping themselves and being professionals. And so I think that it's going to be a good thing for our teachers to have a better understanding of how to relate to different students who may have different cultural perspectives. School is supposed to be an inclusive experience. Everyone should feel like there's a place for them and that there's something that they're good at, that they can connect to in that school. Whether it's a problem understanding something in the classroom or whether it's an issue with them maybe not understanding some of the cultural norms, it would be great to empower the teachers to be able to help them deal with those situations and be able to connect them with resources possibly if they needed that as well. I don't think that it's ever going to be a bad thing for our teachers to have the tools to connect to our students, no matter what their differences may be. And so I think that our CRTL would be an excellent thing for our school district.
Stephen?
No, and no. I agree that there's been a great deal of misunderstanding about what CRTL was, what the BetterLessons plan was. But when you go through and look line for line, point for point on the BetterLessons thing, it included the wording microaggressions and systemic racism and all of these other things that are very, very specifically part of the critical race theory. And those are not mistakes, those were intentional. They renamed it critical responsive teaching and culturally responsive teaching and learning. But the meat behind it is still CRT. I have no problem with diversity. I think the more diverse we are, the better the ideas that come out of a group. I have no problem with being inclusive of people, of saying, yes, anybody can come and be respected. I do have a problem saying that because you are X, you must believe Y, or because you are X, you must have the labels of X put on you. If you are white, you have to be racist. That's wrong. And I think everybody on this board would hopefully agree with that. Looking at the text of that, I have a problem with it. The second argument that was used in the school board was that, oh, well, it's for the teachers, we're not teaching it in the schools. If we're giving teachers training, then that training is supposed to make it to the classroom. What other point is there in giving that teaching? So I have a problem specifically with critical race theory because of its origins, because of the way that it separates people into groups, and I think responsibility exists at an individual level, not a community level. And then would I support it going forward? Absolutely not.
I think we need to be clear that CRTL, culturally responsive teaching and learning, and CRT, critical race theory, are two different things and have been two different things all along. Those two terms have become somewhat muddied in the last year, but it's not that all of a sudden CRT, which is a college level theory, like many other theories, has all of a sudden been renamed culturally responsive teaching and learning. When I think back to my undergraduate degree in the 90s at K-State, I was a social work student in small groups, and there were students in my class who were wonderful people, but who had come from communities where Manhattan, Kansas was the most different they had ever experienced in their entire life. They just hadn't been exposed to things. And without being exposed to things, they didn't know how to handle it, and it was overwhelming to them. And it's, I think, naive to think that teachers don't have that same experience, that they're going to be coming into a classroom with the things that they've been exposed to. I think that enabling our teachers and staff to be able to look at things through different lenses and have open minds and open hearts for all of the students that come into their classrooms, and just know how they're interacting with those students and have better skills and tools in how they're doing that is good for everybody. We know that teaching is relational, probably first and foremost, that before teaching is going to happen, before learning is going to happen, there needs to be a connection between the two people in that interchange. The students need to feel connected to the teachers. And I think having our teachers feel connected and have the skills that they need to connect to their students is important to that. So I guess the answer basically to my question is yes, I do support the decision that we made, and I would support ongoing efforts for professional development in that area for our teachers.
Jamie?
Okay, I'm glad Carla explained that because that was the first thing that came to my mind. These are two different topics. Culturally responsive teaching and learning is not critical race theory. Critical race theory has become a buzzword nationally to stir up division among communities around school board races. That is not what's being discussed. Yes, I supported the CRTL, the Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning, which was professional development for our teachers to help increase their knowledge around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in their classroom. I will always be a proponent for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The opposite of that is exclusion. Do you want to be excluded in your classroom because of your culture, because of who you are as a person? No. So I'm going to say the same things I said when I went to talk to the school board on June 2nd, to support the work of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, not to support CRT, not to support culturally responsive teaching and learning even. I went that night to speak on behalf of students who come to school with something about them that makes them different. Maybe they're part of the LGBTQ community. Maybe they've experienced child abuse and neglect or domestic violence in their homes. Maybe they come from a different ethnic background. Maybe they've moved here from another place. They deserve to be in a classroom where they are treated with respect. In my professional life, I run a program called Thrive, which is a nonprofit program designed to reduce poverty in our community. What I learned very early in my work with Thrive, working with adults and families who've come to us in poverty, is that there are 3 components, and 2 of those have to happen before learning can take place. The first one is safety. People have to feel like they're in a safe place. If you're in a classroom where you feel excluded because you're LGBTQ, you are not going to get to learning. The next thing is relationships. If you can't form a relationship with a teacher because they won't accept you because of your religious beliefs, you're not going to get to learning either. Learning is the 3rd step. Place, relationship, learning. I will do everything in my power to make sure that every student can get to learning.
Thank you. Do we have any follow-up questions?
And again, this is not going to be directed to any one candidate because, like, I want to spread it out.
Start with Teresa.
Okay. Oh, so this is like, it's not specific to one candidate. It's like.
Oh, you don't all have to answer.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but
Wonderful.
You're starting, right?
Sure. Okay. Great. Talking to friends of mine, peers of mine, it's clear that issues like microaggressions continue to kind of plague our high school environments and affect people's learning environments. And I know that, we just answered, would we have supported it in the past, but what does it look like in the future? Are you day one on the school board pushing for it to be re-implemented the second you get a drop of PD money, or is that a goal at some point in the next year or 5 years, right?
So it's not my plan to just come in the door and get at the table and be like, I said, and this is what we're doing. However, would I like to see that revisited so that we can actually implement that in practical application? Yes. I think it's really important for our students to feel like their environment is safe, their environment is welcoming, and it's accepting of whatever their differences may be. And I don't think that this is really it's not really a debate topic. I think it's just more of a topic of caring and understanding and humanity. Every person wants to feel like they're valued in whatever situation they happen to be in. So yes, I would definitely bring that conversation to the table. I don't think that I would put a timeline on when that would happen, because it's not just me. I don't just get to make unanimous, this is what I said, there you go. However, it's definitely something that we need to talk about and put into place.
All right. Microaggressions. I'll start there, and then I do have a little bit more follow-up. When somebody microaggresses against you, my understanding is that can largely be summarized in they are rude to you. They say something indelicate, they make fun of you, something or other. And whatever that isn't something that you have to respond to. Like, you can hold your own self-worth apart from what somebody else says of you. I'm sorry, sir. You're taking a lot of pictures of feet. Okay. Sorry, it just looks like the camera's pointed down.
About 15 seconds.
Thank you. I think that, yes, inclusive, diversity, whatever you want to call it, we need to treat everybody equally, and that's really the bottom line. It's like we don't need to take one thing and move to another.
I'm going to stop you there. Well, we said no follow-ups on follow-ups, so because that's going to take a while. Carla.
So professional development, that area in particular, is determined by the district. Dr. Wade and Dr. Howe, the Director of Teaching and Learning, are who work that together with the Professional Development Committee. So they use our strategic framework that we've all developed and agreed upon as a group. They use that as a starting point to make sure that it is in alignment with what we're doing, but they're also communicating with our teachers and our staff, and they're asking them, what do you want to learn about? And culturally responsive teaching or increased diversity, that was part of what our teachers told us they felt they needed to increase their skills in. And so that coming to the board was part of that coming from our teachers and coming from our administration. So when they come to us with different requests or different information for approval for different sorts of professional development, I think that's part of our role, is to continue to support that.
Yes, I would support diversity, equity, and inclusion professional development in any form that's appropriate. And again, staff will give us the feedback on what that form is. I've been lucky enough to get to do professional development at the district multiple times, district-wide and individual buildings, talking about poverty in our community, talking about child abuse and neglect, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, on Thursday, I'm doing a presentation to the College of Education at their education symposium on diversity and inclusion in the classroom. These are issues that are critically important to me and at the core of my values. So yes, I will continue to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion training as professional development for our teachers.
Do you have any follow-up questions? No? Okay. All right. We're going to move on to the fourth question. We're going to start with Stephen. All right. The Manhattan High School mascot, the Indians, has come under scrutiny in recent years. If the school board were asked to vote on changing the mascot, which side would you be on, and why is that your position? If you do believe we should change it, how would we go about doing that?
Don't change it. I think the Indian image here has a really solid and honorable history for the reason it was made, and I think the Pretnup family in particular is very proud of it. I haven't met anybody from any descent that's really had trouble with it, except to say that, nationally we're taking over or assuming the identities of them inappropriately. And I don't think that's the case. If that is the case, then do we also rename Kansas? Do we rename Manhattan? Do we rename, because those are all Indian words at their root, or Native American words at their root. So I think we've got a really good, honorable and respectful way of doing this. I would rather educate why that is respectful to everyone. Rather than take it away and change it to something because there are political pressures on it. I'll go there.
I do think it is time to I would say respectfully retire the Indian image. I think that it is something that has been on cyclical. It comes up. It has come up for years and years. It goes down for a while and then it comes back. I think that it was done for reasons at the time that were good and respectful. I think that there are good people who see this differently than I do. But I don't think that that necessarily means that it's the right decision to hold on to it. I think that if we want to talk about the root reason for it or the reason for keeping it, would, generally speaking, is an issue of respect for the Prentice family, which I understand, but also that it continues us to have a need to have a conversation about educating our students about indigenous peoples in our community. I think that it serves almost as a distraction because we keep on coming back to this issue. We keep on coming back to this issue instead of actually being able to implement the curriculum changes and talking about all of the different things that we've been hearing about recently. We've been talking more about boarding schools, forced boarding schools. We've been talking this year, we've all now know about the Tulsa massacre. We all know about those things, but we don't know about them because we were taught about them in our schools. And I think that when we keep on having to come back to this as a mascot or as an image, as respectful as we want it to be, we're not necessarily, as a community, not just as Manhattan High School, because I think this is a community issue, we're not filling in all those things underneath. And if we were filling in all those things underneath as a community and really making that substance there, I don't know that we would still be having this conversation.
So I agree with Carla. I think it's time for the mascot to change. I am not in favor of having mascots at schools that are representative of a group of people, whatever group of people that might be, right? The Spartans, the Trojans. I'm not sure that any of those are appropriate names after a group of people. I think that it's time to have a discussion about what do we change it to that involves the community as a whole, not just those people that are in the high school right now, but younger children who will be at the high school, people who have graduated from the high school and moved on. I think it needs to be a community discussion about what is a mascot for our high school that can represent us as a community. And I agree with Carla. The last time that this came up for discussion, the board made the decision that they would keep the Indian mascot, but in doing so, they would provide more education in the schools about the Native population that lived here and about indigenous people. And that has not come to fruition. So to me, another discussion that comes to that same conclusion of let's keep it, but let's do more education wasn't followed through last time. Why would it be followed through again? We also know that the American Psychological Association says having Native mascots is damaging to people. I don't think that that's appropriate for our community. I don't like the message it sends to people coming here from other places. We talk about growing our community with new members coming to work at businesses, the NBAF population that's going to come here. Are they going to feel comfortable if they see that that's what the mascot is that represents the high school in this community? I'm not sure that says inclusion.
Well, not to sound like a copycat, but I also agree that it is time to let the Indian mascot go. When it comes to cultural sensitivity, it's not okay to turn someone's whole entire existence and culture into kind of a joke almost. I went to Manhattan High School, and I remember being in the games and people doing the whole little, ooh, remember the Tomahawk Chuck? I'm sure you've all seen that. Are these things respectful of these people? Not at all. And I do feel like she said, the education piece is missing. Nothing about having the Indian at this point is respectful or representative of the person who motivated us to take that as our mascot. And so I think it's time for us to think outside of just traditions and for us to take this time and think about how we can move forward respectfully and not have to denigrate anybody's heritage to do that.
Okay, again, this is directed to everybody. Okay, so this is like kind of a two-part question. I think 4 or 5 years ago, there was a vote of the high school population on what their opinion of the mascot was, what that should be changed to. And some of you talked about public input when discussing, if it should be changed, what should it be changed to? Is your opinion on the mascot staying or being changed dependent on public opinion? If there was a poll vote, what population should be a part of that poll or vote? Would you respect the results of that regardless if it is in conflict with your personal opinions? Yeah.
I'll take that one. Did you want to? I didn't know if you were.
Why don't we start with Stephen because
Yeah,
he
I just
tried
didn't
to-
know if I couldn't tell if you were wanting to or not.
Sorry, I was just thinking.
Gotcha.
So, that's a question I haven't been asked before. Thank you for the question. I don't know. I try and bring all of my decisions down to a principle and say, based on this principle, here's the logical outflow from that. And so far, my principle has been that the Indian image is respectful in its origin, and I am unwilling to bow to political pressures to make a change. I think because it is respectful in its origin, I would want to continue that respect myself on whether or not I would make a change based on, say, overwhelming support for its change from the community. I don't know. I would have to give that more thought. I could see myself kind of going either way, but the principle of it being respectful in its origin is still there, and I wouldn't want it to be anything less than absolutely overwhelming support in order for me to consider it.
That's the beauty and the challenge of being an elected person, of being a board member, is that it has been my role the last 4 years to make the hard decisions that people are completely split on for good reasons in both directions oftentimes. And if we went back and forth this last year with a what's the general vote, I don't know what we would have done. It would have changed day by day possibly. So I don't think that it's something that goes to a general vote because it's a decision that lasts longer than any of us. Something that's been very frustrating to me in this conversation is that there's a lot of talk about outsiders, that it's outsiders that want this change to happen. And one question that I've had out of all of that is what makes a person an outsider? I've been in this community since 1993, and my kids have gone to USD 3D3 schools that entire time. But to many people, we're still outsiders. And so I don't think that it's a decision that is made by a popular vote because that changes. I think it's something that is the responsibility of a board member no matter how hard it is.
So I served on the city commission for 4 years. And during that time, there were many times that issues came before the commission where people said, I wish the public could vote on this. The public did vote. They voted on who their elected representatives were. We can't put every issue to a public vote. That's why we have representative government. As an elected official, you take the time to listen to both sides. Every issue. There is not a time that I did not take feedback from both sides when it came to a contentious issue. But what it comes down to is making a decision based on your values. When you're electing someone, I always tell people what you need to think about are what are your core values. And you want to elect people who share those core values with you because there's going to be decisions they have to make that no one would have imagined. Think about Carla and decisions she had to make about COVID. When she got elected in 2017, do you think she had that on her radar screen? No. What are your core values? My core values are justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I will make decisions based on those core values. So while I would want public input on what a new mascot might be, I don't want to say that, that's not right. I love public input, but this is not one where my opinion would change based on that.
So I do feel like when it comes to this mascot issue, yes, we need to listen to everyone's opinions, but when it does come down to that decision, it needs to be made by the people that we've entrusted in those positions to do so. I will say that no issue here in school board should be politically focused. Let me say that. Our kids, their education, their well-being, their development, it's not a political issue to me. So I don't care what side of the fence you happen to be on. The number one thing that we should be taking into consideration is what's going to be best for our kids. Is it okay for some kids to feel like they are disrespected or that their history and their heritage is minimized by this? No, it's not okay. So we have to take that into consideration. What's the right thing to do here? And then who are the right people to do it? People that you guys choose.
Okay. Do you have anything? All right. Sorry? You can. So Sam asked one, you can ask one as well.
So, when I think of people that this would affect, it would be like students who are going to Manhattan High and the students who would be going into Manhattan High, and they don't have the chance to vote for you guys, or they're not able to since they're not old enough. So would you take their opinion into account more than, say, like parents or other people in the community who can vote for you, or does your opinion on it stay the same?
I think that starts with me again.
Yeah.
I don't think I would take any more. I don't think my opinion would be moved by the student vote any more or less, maybe less than a parent or a community vote. And that's largely because parents are entrusted with the teaching of the students. The parents have the right and the duty to make sure that their students are educated the right way. And as a community, those who are elder have more life experience and can look ahead towards what is and what isn't. Whereas I think most, not all, there are definitely exceptions where kids have a tremendous amount of life experience. But I think it's up to parents to make that decision for the kids.
I think some of the best feedback that I've had in this last year has come from students. Absolutely, the emails or the board comments that have come my way, those weigh on me very heavily because those are the real life experience of kids that are happening right now. But I think when we're talking about a decision, like this, the decision to create the Indian mascot was made in 1949. So how many generations of students have been through since that time that haven't had a voice in that decision? So I don't necessarily think that we would be asking for a vote from our current students or from our upcoming students. Where do you draw the line for how old is old enough or how young is too young? I also think about the growth that happens. I was interested the other day, I saw a comment where the mentor editor at the time that this was discussed last had a particular opinion about what the situation, what it should be. She commented that she has since then changed that opinion. So growth happens, or change happens, I should say.
Interesting. Well, that's a good question. And again, I don't think it would change how I felt about the issue, but I do think that those are people whose opinion I'd want to hear strongly on what a different mascot would be. I'm really interested in student feedback on a variety of topics. I had the opportunity to go to GSA earlier this year with Carla because together we're starting an LGBTQ community center for youth. And we've gotten significant feedback from the youth on that topic. And that's really exciting to have young people who want to be involved in whatever issue it is. So to me, that's something, if I were elected to the school board, I would be committed to gathering feedback from students of all ages and taking that into account.
So I think it's very important to listen to the students. You're the ones who are having the experience going through our educational system right now. So I think it would be irresponsible for us to not at all try to understand what your perspective is, but we do know that it's adults who are able to go and vote. So yes, in a perfect world, we would hope that these parents are all taking their kids' best interest at heart when they're making their decisions at the polls, but we know that's probably not 100% true. So what we have to do is hope that we're putting people in that position who are thinking about our kids and what's going to be best for them and looking at the big picture and not just how they feel in the moment, because emotions, they're fleeting and sometimes they can change. But what I do want people to do is to take a really critical look at the situation, make sure that they weigh both sides, and then make an informed decision and not just an opinionated one.
All right, so we're going to move on to the fifth question. We're going to start with Carla again. So USD 3.3 is continuing to grapple with the impacts of COVID-19. One of the key issues the board votes on regularly is mask mandates. If you were on the board 6 days ago, on October 20th, and asked to vote on its continuation, would you have voted to lift the mandate in USD 383? Under what conditions do you believe we should or should not have one?
I was on the board last Wednesday, October 20th, and I did vote to change that. And I did it knowing that there are people who, generally speaking, have agreed with my decisions in the last 18 months that really would strongly disagree with this decision. I knew that and I understood that. But I have to make the decisions that I feel are right for that situation. I took the information that was being provided to us through our medical advisory team. We went back and forth with them several times. We've been in communication with them all through this whole thing. I am encouraged, and I will say that one thing that influenced my decision was the knowledge that we were pretty close to that 5 to 11 group being approved for vaccinations. And that committee came back today to the FDA and said that they're on the right track. So I think we're close to that happening. I would have felt better about my decision because it wasn't an easy one if we were already in that position, so that parents who chose to have their younger kids vaccinated would have that option. That was a challenge for me in that position because I know that we've got some risks. But I also think that we have to look to the future. I don't want us to live in masks our entire life. And I realize also that we're not going to get down to zero COVID. It's just not going to happen. It is part of our life now, and I want us to be able to start moving forward and find ways that we can do our activities and reclaim some of those things. It's going to look different than it used to. Am I at 15 or done?
30 seconds.
Okay, 30. And it was a decision that, again, like I said, not everybody that has agreed with me in the past agreed with me on this decision, and it's one that I had to stand by. And I'm also willing, if we need to, I'm willing to change that. I'm willing for us to move back. I think we need to watch very carefully where our numbers go. We need to be mindful of what's happening, and we need to be ready to change if we need to. We are taking knowledgeable risks, and they are risks, but I think that we're ready to step in that direction.
Before we move on to Jamie, sorry, I just want to clarify. For the main questions, candidates are given 2 minutes, and I'm stopping them 3/4 of the way through, warning them 3/4 of the way through at 30 seconds.
Okay.
Follow-up questions are only 1 minute.
Okay.
And so I'm stopping them 3/4 of the way through at 15 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Perfect, thanks, Chris. So Carla and I actually disagree on this. If I were on the school board 6 days ago, I would not have made the same vote. I can appreciate where it came from. I've read the information from the medical advisory committee. I'm much more cautious about COVID than other people are, right? We all have our own comfort level with risk, and mine has been fairly low with this. My concern is the vaccination rate is not high enough at the high school in my mind to remove the mask mandate at this point. Would I like to see that higher? Yes, but that's parents' choices if they want to get their kids vaccinated, or for those of you who are 18, it's your choice if you want to be vaccinated. For younger children, I would not consider removing a mask mandate until there was a reasonable rate of vaccination among kids in those age ranges. So this, to me, is an example of many that we see in our school district that relying on professionals is important. We have amazing professional staff in the district. We have amazing community members that are serving on the medical advisory team related to COVID specifically. And I think getting that information is crucial to making good decisions. But it still comes down to your values and making decisions based on your values. And my value in this case, where we are right now, I'm not saying forever people should wear masks, but at the point we're at right now and with the information we have right now, I would have voted to continue masks at the high school.
Right. Well, I too I kind of err on the side of caution. As a parent whose child was in school last year when the COVID was happening, my daughter was very, very relieved when we went to distance learning because she was scared to go to school because she knew that some people were making individual choices and that there were people who were choosing not to wear a mask. Do I think that this is something that needs to go long term? No, but we do need to have a viable vaccination for our younger children and then come up with a way that we can make sure that the vaccination rate in the high school is not something that's going to put people's children at risk when they go to learn. I just think that this is something that kind of comes down to a matter of courtesy for others. Even if you don't get the vaccine, you could still contract it and carry it and pass it to someone else who's not vaccinated. or who's not wearing their mask, I just don't ever want to have a decision that I make be something that could affect somebody's ability to be safe and healthy.
For clarity, you can still catch COVID even if you have the vaccine, and Christine actually did. Oh, sorry. No masks. I think they were a bad choice the first time around. I can understand the reason to have done it, but I think we as a community know enough about COVID now for it to be a parent choice. I respect anybody that wants to wear a mask. I think we should prevent the discrimination either direction if people do or don't want to wear a mask in the schools, and that's something they're going to start dealing with in November, it sounds like. I think we need to prevent that discrimination one way or the other. But at this point, parents are responsible for their kids. They always have been. Leave it up to the parents to choose. Leave it up to the kids to choose if the parents want to give the decision to them. I think I'm going to extend this to vaccines. I don't know if there's going to be a different question, but vaccines, masks, both are a parent choice. That's not something that should be in the authority of the school board to mandate. Whether it is good or not is not actually as much of a question as whether or not it is right. I don't think the school board has the authority to do the mandate.
Okay, follow-up question?
Hey. Okay, so my question is about teachers specifically. I've spoken with some of my teachers that, might have family members who are immunocompromised. They might be immunocompromised themselves, and they are concerned about the fact that they cannot require masks in their specific classrooms. How do you expect to respond to teacher concerns, or how would you respond to teacher concerns in the future about how they can, meter out authority about both anti or pro-mask discrimination that occurs post November 1st, as well as personal concerns they have about their health and their family members' health?
I spoke to this a bit on Wednesday night because I realized that. I realized that there are teachers and staff members who have very personal risks themselves or family members. And that's part of what made this decision so hard. I think the first thing that we have to lead with is empathy and kindness. I hope that as those teachers are able and comfortable with sharing with their students what their reasons might be or what their concerns might be, that students would be respectful and would be kind and would exhibit that, even if they're not wearing their masks all day long, but perhaps to wear it during that teacher's class. I realize that the teachers might not be able to enforce that or aren't able to enforce that. I also think that then the next step is for them to speak with the administrator for their building or their NEA rep, and talk about what accommodations might be available or might be necessary in order to make them feel more supported. I'm also encouraged by the fact that our teachers have been able to get that booster shot, and I've seen quite a few of our teachers go out and get their boosters already, and I'm encouraged by that.
I think teacher feedback, staff feedback is incredibly important on many topics, right? They're the ones that are in these buildings every day, and we're asking them to do something right now that may be risky for them or for their family members. Again, I think their feedback would be crucial in making the decision whether or not masks should be worn. It would be something that would have weighed into my thinking had I been there last Wednesday to vote. The fact that there are staff members who are not comfortable, and there are students too. I'm working with a young man right now who is thinking about changing to virtual academy because he's not comfortable because of his own health conditions being in a school where people are not being masked. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't like the fact that there are students and staff who feel like their safety is being compromised by the fact that people are not wearing masks.
I do agree with that. I think that we do expect our schools to provide a safe place for our students to learn. But if it's not safe for everyone to be able to be in that environment, what are our options? So you got to think about the bigger picture. If we have a teacher who may be immunocompromised and we have a student who doesn't wear their mask, are we wanting to take the chance that that teacher, while she's trying to serve our children, would be able to come in contact with something detrimental to her health, and then that's going to affect her ability to even do her job as a teacher? I think that we have to kind of err on the side of human courtesy and kindness. For me, even before it was a mandate that everybody had to have masks in places, I was wearing my mask just because. I hope that our students would have that opportunity as well to make those choices, and then for the teachers to have an opportunity to make their own good choices.
For the first time, I think I agree with Carla on this one. I think there has to be, or I'll rephrase. I think it goes to the individual responsibilities, because I don't believe as a principal that the school board has the right to make the mask mandate. It follows that for the sake of the teachers, I can't all of a sudden change my mind. As that's the case, I think there are incredible a number of people that are very conscientious towards others. When you had the flu 6 years ago, your mom kept you out of school. And I get that that's not exactly the same thing, given how much more transmissible COVID is. But the principle exists that if you are feeling ill, then you take those precautions. And as a society, we become very hyper aware of that. And I think that we have to leave it to that common courtesy.
Do you have a follow-up question? No. All right. We're going to move on to the last question, and that's going to start with Jamie. So your voters are not the student body. There are parents and the greater community. However, the largest portion of people you will serve are students. How will you prioritize our voice in the decisions you make on the board?
Excellent question. That's a great one to end with. I think student feedback is absolutely crucial. Just like I think teacher and staff feedback is crucial, right? Those are the core populations that are being served by our schools. If students don't feel like they're getting what they need, if they don't feel like their needs are being met, if they don't feel like school is a safe place for them, I want to be accessible to them. I will do my best to work with administration to be able to be in school buildings on a regular basis. Have time to interact with students, time to interact with faculty and staff. That is incredibly important, again, to one of my core values, which is respecting the opinion of those who are affected by my decisions. And when it comes down to it with school board, the decisions that I make impact you as students. I care about what you think. I know that there may be difficulties in getting into every building. Some administrators may be hesitant to allow school board members in or to allow them in on a regular basis. And right now with COVID, it may be very difficult to do that. So I'm going to think outside the box again. How can I get student feedback without maybe necessarily having to interact in person? Can we have some Zoom times? Can we figure out other ways to get feedback? I am very concerned to hear what you have to think. So I hope that whether you can vote yet or not, that you care enough to be here tonight. I mean, that says something. So thank you for taking the time to show up. I appreciate that. And I hope that you would be willing to share your feedback because it matters. The decisions that are being made affect you. Your voice matters.
Not to piggyback, but I'm going to say that one of our most important concerns is you guys' safety, well-being, and development. I would love to have some sort of a vessel or forum for you guys to be able to give direct feedback about things and issues and concerns that you have so that we can address those at the table. I do think that it's important for us to not only have that transparency, but that open and accessibility. And so, yes, I agree with Jamie. I would love to be able to be in the schools and visit certain schools, especially those ones that we know are hot spots and have issues going on. We need to be hands-on there. We can't just sit behind the table and make those decisions without ever having the opportunity to engage with you guys. And so, you guys, the staff, the teachers, those are our priorities. And so the first question that I'm going to be asking myself when we have decisions to make is this in the student's best interest or not? That needs to be one of our primary concerns, not about how people are going to think about our decisions. Was this a decision in you guys' best interest? That needs to be our number one priority, and that's something that I plan to bring to the board. And thank you guys for being here. I was not this civically minded when I was in high school, and I am so impressed by you. Everybody give your parents a high five.
I agree with your last statement. Thank you all for being here. I think it's wonderful that so many people care enough about this, whether you agree with us or not. I'll say us, but however that breaks out. I'm going to say I care significantly more about you being prepared for the real world than I do about the comfort that you exist in. The teachers that I respect most in retrospect are not always the ones I liked the best. They're the ones that challenged me to grow. So far as how can I keep you guys in mind while I'm on the board, you can certainly reach out. I would love to hear your opinions. They'll definitely be weighed. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do what I can to make sure that you're prepared, that you're challenged, and that you can rise to those challenges, because I think you're capable of it. And I think too many people march through life without the pressure that turns them into diamonds. And that doesn't have to be harsh, but it does have to be there. And I'd like to exert that pressure to encourage you to do better than you're doing, to grow as people and be ready to contribute when you graduate.
I don't know that there's a student group that has invited me to come and speak with them that I've turned it down. I mean, that's the one invitation I'm always going to be open to and always going to make time for. There's not a student email that didn't get a response from me. In the great volume of emails, I will be honest and say I don't return every email from adults. Many times they're not looking for a response, they're just looking to give me their input, and that's fine. But I think if a student takes the time to reach out, I'm going to respond to them. Something that we were doing before COVID that we had started during my board term was coffee talks with board members. And we had it once a month on a Saturday morning at a public location, and 2 board members were present. It was always announced ahead of time where it was, when it was, and which 2 board members would be there. And it was just open to the public. Very honestly, we didn't get a whole lot of people coming. But when we did get somebody to come, it was a really good conversation. And sitting here and thinking about it right now, we already know we want to start doing that again at some point. But maybe that's another outreach. Maybe that's a second setting or an evening setting or some other kind of setting. I don't know if you want to get up on Saturday mornings to come hang with us. But, I think being open and providing opportunities for students to just have that open door to come and speak with us, because not every student is involved in a student group. Not every student is on Stuco or in another club or organization, but I think that their voices are equally important. And so I think giving them an opportunity to be able to come and have that connection with us. For myself, having a student that just came through Manhattan High School and having a middle schooler at the moment, those poor kids are really sick and tired of me asking their opinion about stuff. Of them coming home and me saying, okay, what's it like at this? Or what's this experience been like? Or I'm hearing this. Is that what it's like for you? I get a lot of eye rolls about that. And so then I talk to their friends. They're much nicer about it. But I mean, that's the reality of it, is we want to know what you guys are experiencing.
Follow-up questions? No? All right. Okay, so we're going to move to the open mic now. So chance for all of you guys to ask questions, but I'm going to go through a few ground rules just before we start. So we're going to limit each person to 1 question. I know a lot of you guys are really excited, and I know a lot of you guys are on the debate team, but we're going to ask 1 question at a time, guys. All right. Please, so please make it, short and to the point. We're trying to get as much candidate feedback to simple, not necessarily simple, but direct questions. And then please direct a question at like 1 specific candidate. So if you have a question for 1 specific candidate, please pick them, and they will get 2 minutes to respond to you. Once the
Try
candidate...
to spread that out, please, so that 1 candidate is not getting every single question. I know I had that conversation with some of you yesterday.
Yes, try and spread it around, guys. Also, once you ask the question, the candidate will respond to you, and don't speak over them while they're responding. I don't think that will be an issue, but just saying. And then we're going to end this at 7:30. So yeah, the line's going to be over here. Sam's going to have the microphone. I can do this.
Bueller. Nobody ever wants to be first.
Bueller.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, I'm Jessica, and I'm a junior at Manhattan High. I have a question for Jamie. So I, as a person of color, have experienced multiple microaggressions, and it's definitely like affected me. So what would you do as a school board member if a student came to you with problems like I had? And I also have gone to administration and teachers,
Okay.
and in my opinion, nothing has been done.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that was hard to share, so thank you for being brave enough to stand up and say that. I appreciate it. I think that you took the right steps by talking with teachers and administration. Then you move to the next level, which is, come to a board member. Get a board member to go with you and go talk to the district administration, right? Sometimes it's hard to self-advocate. That's something that I'm constantly trying to teach my child who's an 8th grader to work on self-advocacy. It's hard. But you know what? My whole professional career has been being an advocate for kids. And I love the opportunity to help people advocate for themselves. So I would be happy as a school board member to be by your side and continue to move that up the chain until we can get something done. That's incredibly important to me. I want every student to feel safe. I don't want anyone to be in a building where they feel like there is a specific teacher or another student who's making them feel unsafe. And if those things are happening, I agree, you took the right steps so far, but let's keep moving that along, right? There's more to that than ending at your building administration. If it's not being taken care of at that level, we keep going up the chain.
Steven's got a list.
Okay, I'm going to aim this question at Ms. Parks.
What's your name, sweetie?
Megan.
Megan, nice to meet you.
With the current USD 383 dress code, students are too often forced to miss class because they were dressed inappropriately. What is your position on the current dress code policy, and would you be willing to change it?
So, first of all, one of the things that I have seen when it comes to the dress code policy is an inequity there. Girls are getting dinged for dress code violations way more than boys. And my sons have all gone there, my daughters have gone there, and my daughters have been sent home for the exact same kind of tank top that my sons were, and were fine all day. So I absolutely think that there needs to be something done about that, and not just about the inequities, but some of the things that they have on there. Who's the person that makes the rule about the thickness? You know what I'm talking about there, right? Ladies, guys, y'all may not be getting dinged for some of this stuff, but the ladies, y'all feel me. When it comes to skirt length, no, I don't think that they should be able to have their hoo-ha out, but you know what I'm saying? But does it have to necessarily be 2 inches past your hemline, depending on how long your arms are, how tall you may be? There's so much specifics that needs to go into the consideration of that dress code. Oh my goodness. And then I feel like it's doing more harm because we're punishing you guys for something that's really not equitable, and then you're missing class time. So what's more important, 2-finger width strap or you being able to go to your calculus class? So I definitely think that's something that we need to sit down as a board and have a conversation about, because it's not fair. Let me say that. I feel you. Not fair. Oh, she has a follow-up question. I'll take a follow-up question. Oh, she has one for everybody. She said somebody else take a turn because I got more. I love you, Megan. You are my jam.
All right. My name is Ronan Tanona. I'm a senior. And my question was for Ms. Hagemeister. And based on your experience being on the school board, what kind of policies and initiatives do you support to move the district to greener practices? And based on your experience, what would that look like?
That's a good question. While we were designing Oliver Brown Elementary School, that was a big conversation for us, was there is, and I'm not going to get the name of it right, but there is a gold standard. There's probably a whatever is above gold, platinum, whatever, of that. And there's a balance that always has to happen in between being environmentally conscious and being environmentally responsible, and then also being fiscally responsible. So that's a challenge, and it was something that we worked on. She's not composting anymore, but I have a Go Green kid. I have a kid who's on the environmental team at school, and was in elementary school and will be in high school. We are a recycling family. So I think that there's things that are happening at the local level, at the small scale level within our individual schools, but then there's also practices that we need to be looking at as a district as a whole. We got a board comment just last week about ordering school supplies for our kids as a district rather than everybody supplying them themselves. One of the arguments for that was if the school district is ordering those things in bulk, then we're getting what sort of level of packaging? Because we're ordering them from the great big suppliers that are going to send us boxes of huge things of pencils instead of each of us buying our 20 box of Ticonderoga, however you say that word, pencils that we all our teachers like better, and all the individual packaging of that. So it goes from very small scale to very large scale conversations, and I think that having that be a focus of the environment, be a focus, and environmental responsibility can happen at all levels of those decision making.
Come on back, Megan. I'm playing, I'm not running this. I'm gonna hush up. Don't listen to me.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Ms. Morris Hagen.
You're close.
Okay. Would you support vaccine mandates for middle and high school students to participate in extracurricular, specifically COVID vaccine mandates?
For extracurricular activities, that's interesting.
Or like school dances, things that are optional.
Okay, that's interesting. No, I'm not in favor of vaccine mandates. There are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with this vaccine in particular. I'm coming at this from a scientific background, so I have a master's degree in biochemistry. Science is important to me, and that's why the whole decision-making process around COVID has been scientifically based in my mind. I'm looking to experts for that. I would want to require masks. I think that's the best next option. And I don't know. I don't want to say we're going to wear masks for the rest of our lives because I don't think we are, but I don't think we're anywhere near the point yet that we're ready to be done with masks. Good question. I appreciate that. I've just been hesitant to think about the COVID vaccine mandate for students.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Honor Robinson, and I have a question. I did come here late. I deeply apologize. I was watching over the live stream, and I had thought of a good question that most of you, I believed, answered really well, even without asking any of the question that I'm about to ask. So I am going to specify this to Mr. Rusin. I'm so sorry. And I apologize for my wavy voice. I just ran here because it was important. Let me grab it for you. I would like to specify that I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to specify this because as a queer student, I have been discriminated against, and just like many others who are, I believe, maybe thinking the same question but not strong enough to answer. Recently, in many states, such as Illinois, California, and many others, they have finally passed through the school board LGBTQ+ education in history and other subjects. I would like to believe your stance on this and what you believe we should do as a school, if we should do that, if we should proceed with that, and how would that look?
So first off, thank you for being brave enough to ask that question, and thank you for running from home in order to have the opportunity to ask it. Like, that is absolutely awesome.
I'm very proud of, not proud, sorry.
So I want you to be proud of that. That's really cool. My personal stance is that having speech forced on others, this kind of comes from the Jordan Peterson line of thought on it, requiring somebody else to use a term is different than being, I guess, forced speech is not necessarily free speech. So I think people have the right to offend other people, and that is offensive, and they shouldn't do it. But they have the right to. So I would not go for any force of they, them in the curriculum or anything like that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
I'd be happy to answer a follow-up question.
There was like another part of your question.
Okay. We're
Yeah.
trying to avoid like debates happening. But if you already had a written out follow-up question, go ahead and ask that question, and then we'll move on to somebody else.
My question is Oh, you said not to do it in a debate, though. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to, could you say that you don't want to force that on anybody, but how would that be forcing students to learn about others' individuality? If we're already teaching that in ways through history and how even we want, as anybody, to go through our past, why is that any different?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
If we're teaching people to be themselves and be who they are, teaching every single aspect of this and that, why is it not acceptable to teach about that aspect and choose that opinion? In essence, specify why you don't think that's okay, or that shouldn't, not okay, shouldn't be when we are already teaching other aspects.
So I'm going to get to the question I think you're trying to ask me second, and I apologize. I don't know how much time I'm going to have here.
You know what? I'll just give you 2 minutes, and then let's
Okay.
move on to another thing.
Sorry.
I reiterate my point about freedom of speech. Anybody has the right to say anything that they want to say. And I would say that there are some laws on the books that cover specifically slander or lying about another person. And those would be interesting to look at in connection with this. I think what you're trying to ask me behind that is that my personal belief is that God created two genders, male and female. Is that not where you were going? Okay. So while I don't agree with that side of it, I believe that every person has the right to be respected. And the way that I treat you, although I would choose not to use they, them, I wouldn't know necessarily, like I would just call you by your name to be polite. And I would avoid those from my own personal freedom. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I would try and treat you with all of the respect I could, while I disagree with that aspect of your life. So that's a pretty direct answer. Does that cover what you were trying to ask, I guess?
You went a bit of a different way, but for time's sake, yeah. Thank
We're
you
going
so
to say
much.
that. Okay.
Guys, just make a line. Just make a line.
Ah, there we go. We got a line now.
Okay, I'm going to direct this question at Teresa. So over the summer, late summer, early school year, there was a subcommittee that I got the pleasure to be a part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, in which we evaluated the freshman curriculum. And to basically sum up our findings, we spent a good 3 weeks talking about the first unit in English that the freshmen talk about, because it's really jam-packed with diverse authors and more than just like, you know, the white authors that we're kind of like forced to read. And then we got the rest of the unit, like the rest of the entire year done within like a week, because it was all pretty self-explainable that they jam-packed all of the diversity into the beginning of the year and then nothing more throughout the rest of the year. How would you suggest to the English department as a whole to help diversify their narrative?
Thank you for that question. So, and that's a good one. So I'm actually on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee Task Force for Manhattan. And as we have been meeting, we have been meeting all year. So the fact that y'all got something done and that looked like I'm commendable. But I do think it's important to have a diverse exposure for the students to different types of literature, different authors who come from different types of backgrounds and different genres. So I think that it needs to be something that the teachers are trying to spread out throughout the year and not just try to cram into 28 days for Black History Month. You know, please don't try to put the Black authors in the short month for me. That's how I felt when I was a student there at Manhattan High, so I understand that. I think that it's something that is a teacher's responsibility to try to broaden you guys' minds and your thinking and your perspective. And so it is something that needs to be put into something that's going to be a year-round thing. Maybe do a rotation of different authors and then have a set system of, okay, we did this author for this amount of weeks, this author for this amount of weeks, this author for this amount of weeks, and they need to come up with like a curriculum list for each year that's going to be more inclusive for students. That's how I felt.
I'm not done yet.
Love her.
Okay, this question is directed at Mr. Risen. Okay. So in light of the comment you just made about God creating two genders and a comment you made earlier at the League of Women's Voters Forum, I think that's the right forum, what do you think there should be a role of religion in public schools? And if you do, why?
Good question. I don't think any specific religion should necessarily be proclaimed in the public schools. As a Christian myself, my values dictate the worldview from which I perceive everything. I go back to the Bible as being the source of truth. And in my own studies, I haven't found anything that disproved it or even really came close. So far as how that affects my decisions on the board, my views, my decisions come from that framework. I believe in an objective morality with absolute truth. And based on those, I think that treating the golden rule, love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself, the more quoted part of it, we need to be respectful of each other, but my decisions will be driven by my value set.
Let's just not do that.
Do I still have any time?
You had 46 seconds left.
Okay.
If you want to.
I'm going to go back to, I'm going to try and get back to your original question being religion in schools should be taught in that I think all of being aware of a bunch of different societies and being aware of the differences and the diversity of them is useful for everybody to be able to relate to each other respectfully.
My question will be directed at Mr. Rusin. How do you intend to make schools a safe and inclusive environment for students who have been faced with challenges because of their ethnicity, gender identity, and or sexuality?
This is going to almost be a repeat. I think that everybody needs to be treated with respect, but I don't think we should force everybody to agree with everybody else. So how to make it a safe place? I think you enforce that respect if somebody is mistreated, if somebody is ridiculed, I don't know, whatever, beat up, whatever the situation is. All of those can be addressed separately by the school administration, by the staff. It's never okay to mistreat somebody or to name call or ridicule, bully. Any of that needs to be stopped regardless of the reason that it was bullied for.
Hello, my name is Emmett Spa. I'm a senior. I have a question for Mrs. Hagemeister. Seeing as you have experience on this board, going forward, this is a two-parter, by the way. Going forward, do you think there are any topics that are going to be addressed that we need to be talking about now? Follow-up question would be, should we be talking about them like literally right now within this meeting?
I'm really excited about personalized learning, if you haven't heard me say that yet. I think that that's a missed opportunity for all of us to be talking about, because I think that that's something that our students have been telling us for a long time, and then in a different language, adults and job employers are telling us, and we're just talking past each other. You know, my kids have told me long and at length when they do talk that school can be boring, that they sit and, I mean, there's a whole lot of reading that happens or happened from one and happens right now with my other in her free time, because school is not moving at a pace that's relevant to her. And job employers and colleges and stuff are telling us that our kids are needing something different than what they're getting. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to really be looking at how are we teaching, and I won't get the pedagogy correct, but our teachers have talked about that model of kids just being sponges or banks that teachers stand up in front of the room and pour information into isn't really how people learn. And so I'm ready for us as a board and as a school district and as a community to start having conversations around really reimagining what does it look like for our kids to be learning, and what do we need to be offering to them that's relevant to what they're needing, and then also how do we deliver that in a way that's supportive of our teachers. I do think that we need to be really mindful right now of not asking our teachers to do any more than they're already doing. There cannot be anything else put on their plate without taking something else off. This year, these last few years have been just as hard on our teachers as they have been on every other person on the planet. And I think that we need to be very mindful and cautious and considerate about what that looks like.
Thank you.
For addressing Mr. R, okay, I'm Kennedy Crabtree, and you've mentioned multiple times about what the school board has power over. Can you give grounds for what they should be able to announce or have power over versus what they shouldn't?
I don't think I've got a exact list of everything that I think should and shouldn't be, but in short, I believe that it is the parent's responsibility to educate the child, and that the school board should be the least invasive tool possible for them to use. I think we should be as restricted as possible to teach education and allow all of the rest of it to be handled at a parental level. So questions about health, go to the parents. Questions about morality, go to the parents. They're the ones that should be teaching those kids their morality, their worldview. I would like to see the schools be a place for kids to come to learn and then get returned to their parents again.
My name is Ethan Zinn. I'm a freshman at Manhattan High, and I want to direct this question towards Jamie in the blue. So I and many other peers that I've talked to have experienced microaggressions as a person of color. I wanted to ask specifically how you plan to educate others, like in the school, about microaggressions, or how you plan on dealing with, I don't know, microaggression issues, or students that have problems dealing with microaggressions,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
No, that's great. Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it. I think there are so many different ways that needs to be addressed. We need to address it through professional development with our educators so that they can identify when things like that are happening. But I know oftentimes that's happening, well, I hope it's not happening to you from the educators, but it may be. If that's the case, then I want to be sure that that's being addressed with the educators. I know oftentimes it may be happening to you when you're in the hall between classes or at lunch, not in the sight of a teacher. And that, again, is something I think we need to be able to empower students to feel like they can go to someone and say that that's happened to them. But it's also education in the classroom about systemic racism. And it's education about how does that exist in our world, because it does, and how do we, as other people, say things that we don't even know are hurtful to someone, right? That happens. It's education of what can be hurtful to someone. And I think that we have a responsibility as schools to be providing that. Part of that's the school social worker, part of it's the counselors. So making sure that every person in the school is aware, but that also means starting at the elementary level, those discussions are happening with students so that they're aware of how their behavior impacts others and what things are appropriate and what things are not. And I'm sorry that that's happened to you. That makes me very sad. I've heard those stories time and again for a variety of reasons that people are seeing microaggressions. Race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation. That is not okay. School should be a safe place, and we need to figure out better ways to address that. No, thank you for asking.
We actually have 2 questions submitted on the behalf of Young Democrats. People who couldn't be here.
Oh, wow.
So we've got 20 minutes. We're gonna try and get through those before we go back to open mic.
They're just on our Instagram, so they're not necessarily
that's cool.
from Young Democrat. But
Oh,
yes.
sorry.
No, you guys can stay in line. It's okay. Hold on, I gotta go to the archive because it was.
Are they at a specific candidate?
I don't think so.
Can we pick a specific candidate?
Sure, I can do that. Okay. And these are not very articulate because they were on an Instagram story. So this one just reads STEM programs/goals. So I'll direct that at Ms. Hagemeister because I feel like she's gotten like 2 questions so far. So I guess how will you work in the future to address student concerns about STEM programs/goals?
First, sadly, I guess I would want to know more about the question. I think that STEM education is important and is as important as any other direction. I mean, I think we can't do one to exclude the other. Sorry, that's a tough one just because it's not super explicit. I would want to know whether or not students are feeling like we're not providing enough opportunities at this point. My guess is that that's what maybe that direction is. And I think that that is something that is happening or is being discussed or is ready to be discussed through that career academy conversation that's happening. Our relationship with MATC, our relationship with the different pathways that we're looking at. I think we need to expand that. I know that for a lot of students, that STEM connection, again, it's that hands-on learning that is very meaningful. Our high school student, welding was a big deal for him. Welding was not an academic issue for him. Welding was a connection to school for him. And so I think that those sorts of activities and those sorts of pathways need to be strengthened. It's something that we have a lot on our plate all the time, and we can grow in all directions. And that is one of the areas that I do think we need to grow in. But I think that we're capable of doing that. And I think, again, that if we follow the lead through that personalized learning, we're going to make a lot of avenues in that regards. Because part of that personalized learning is being more connected to our community. It is being connected to the different job avenues that are available to us and putting our students into real world experiences where they get to have hands-on that equipment that we might not have a resource for to have actually physically at the school, but they're off-site. They're in a location where they can be doing and experiencing those things. We have a lot of resources in our community for that.
Okay, and the second question, and I will direct this one towards Teresa Parks, I guess, was also pretty brief. It just said PE requirement, but I can guess what that probably means.
Okay.
Many students are unhappy that as a graduation requirement there are 2 PE credits required. How would you address student concerns about this? Do you feel like that's the board's decision to make? What are your thoughts on that issue?
So, PE comes under the umbrella of curriculum. As a student who did not particularly enjoy running the mile and doing stuff like that, I think that also needs to kind of come down to some sort of personalized learning. We need to find some options for students to be able to understand about health and wellness, but maybe not necessarily feel like they're, look, y'all, I was a struggle bunny, okay? I'm not trying to do a lot of cardio. I maybe want to do a little bit of basketball, maybe a little volleyball, but I don't want to run after the ball. I just want to serve it. And so there's students like me. I was not that student who enjoyed all of those things. However, every now and then we would do a unit in PE, and I would find something that I actually loved. So I still think that students need to have that exposure, but I don't think that PE should fall under some kind of cookie cutter kind of curriculum for them. It's going to be different. I think it should be different for different students depending on what some of their talents, skills, and passions are. That's how I feel about that. So as a school board, I would definitely want to discuss that because as a personal struggler, I was a little more fluffy too when I was, had a little extra on me. And so sometimes I felt embarrassed when we were doing those health and fitness tests and stuff. I don't want somebody else to see me struggle doing my push-ups and I'm just shaking. That messes with kids' self-esteem, And so then you also had those kids who had hygiene issues and not having time to get a shower before they go to, all of that falls underneath that. So that's some discussions that we need to have, for real. Struggle.
Actually, I have a personal question, so am I allowed to, Chris?
I suppose.
Okay.
We did not make a rule for that, so.
Sorry, Megan. Okay, so this one will be for Mr. Rusin, and it's a different kind of question than the ones that you've been getting asked. So recently, the New York City School District voted to end gifted and talented programs for students who were put on the gifted track As a student with a gifted IEP myself, I find that this personalized education is really helpful for my ability to engage in the classroom. Do you find that gifted and talented programs, gifted falling under special education, is a valuable aspect of our schooling system? How would you address student concerns about how that evolves over time?
Thank you for sharing. I had not been aware of that situation, but I went through some gifted programs in 4th grade specifically before I moved to Ohio. And I found from my experience and what I've witnessed in other people is there's a great number of gifted people that get bored in class, that don't feel engaged because they will, I had terrible grades through high school. I'd ace a test and then do no homework because homework was just practice for the test. And if I could do the test, then I didn't. Anyway, I think that we need to challenge people, and that particularly people that are gifted. One of the great things from SPED and a bunch of these other places that are geared towards those who are not performing as well is that we can try and bring them up. But we can't forget about the people that are achieving and want to achieve more. It's like we need to make sure that we're not holding them back. So I would be very in favor of gifted programs to whoever can get into them. I know that there's some, and I think that's probably why it got removed, is because it was saying, oh, it's unfair to other students that some get in, and there's probably some political ramification of that. But I'd like to promote those that are gifted, that can achieve more, and that want to. I don't want them to be held back.
This is the last one, I promise. I'm going to point this one towards Ms. Hagemeister. As students, many of us see how overwhelmed and underpaid our staff is at USD.
I'm sorry, can you start over? I couldn't hear. The basketball is exciting out there.
As many students, many of us see how overworked and underpaid our staff is at USD 383. If you were given the opportunity, would you advocate for adequate compensation for our staff, specifically bus drivers, janitors, and paras?
Absolutely. I think that, and that's an issue that we've wrestled with every year, and we will continue to wrestle with, because our budget is our budget. And our budget, the bulk of it is our people. The bulk of it is our staff. They are what take up the bulk of it, and that's how it should be. They are our greatest resource. It is a reality that a workforce that is not adequately compensated is not going to be a stable workforce, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that locally, statewide, nationally. And so I think that that's something that we need to continue to work on. It's not something that gets solved overnight. It is something that we have improved in the last 4 years. Specifically last year, we increased their pay significantly. But part of that was because we had to do it. We needed to do it. It was the right thing to do, and I stand by that, and I stand by continuing to do that. But in essence, it is going to be an essential thing to do for school districts across the nation to make sure that they're compensating their staff in a way that they can survive. We want people to be able to work at our school district and pay their bills. And if we want good employees that are loyal to us and that give us their best every day, we have to hold up our end of the bargain as well.
Hi again. Honor Robinson again, and I forgot to specify before, I'm actually a junior. Did not realize that was part of the memo. And I deeply apologize. I did not catch your name. You in the floral? Yes.
Teresa Parks.
Teresa Parks. I'm so sorry. This is going to be towards you. I have always been a bullied child, and I would just like to ask, what I would like to ask everybody, but just specifically you, is through grade levels and through the school, do you think that we should have more precautions, or do you think that we should have, and more precautions meaning as like learning towards and like pushing it in school, or do you think, as some may think, house-wise, what is your stance on that? Do you think it should be the schools to put up with this and to deal with this, or do you think it should be the parents to deal with this and put up with this?
Talking about bullying?
about bullying, disrespect, microaggression, kind of that kind of stuff that I've stated in the
Gotcha.
past question.
So that's not just an either or. That's both people's responsibility. The school is responsible for creating and having maintaining a safe environment for those kids. But as a parent of 4 kids who have gone through Manhattan High, I know that bullying is a thing. I know that it happens. And then there's ramifications that come from that. My daughter had a friend who went to Manhattan High, who was trans, and they had a great summer working at the art center doing dramatics. Her friend left here because she was being bullied here, went to Junction City and got bullied some more, and then killed themselves. Yes. So for people to think that bullying is not an issue, that it's not serious, that it's not affecting kids, that's wrong. We need to be proactive in the schools. We need to make sure that we have staff there that children can build a bond and a rapport with, that they can feel comfortable telling someone when something is happening and knowing that there's going to be some action that's going to help stop that from happening. You know, school resource officers are not always the only option and tool, although I feel like we've had some great ones here. All of my children have a relationship with a cop because of the resource officers that were in their school. And even now, I can't see Officer Townsend anywhere without my daughter wanting to go and talk to him because she was bullied for a while. And he was her safe space. But she also knew her mama was crazy, and I'll come to that school, and then I'll go off on the teachers and the principal and everybody until something is done to make her feel safe. That is my job as the parent, is to come in there and let y'all know when my kid's not safe and what are you going to do about it. But then it's their job to do something about it. So it's on both sides there. I don't think it's just education either. They have to have some things where maybe they're interacting and helping them build those bonds, maybe helping them understand those children who may be different or weird or special. I got 4 kids in my house that are different and weird and special, and I love them, okay? So I hope that y'all loved them too. I don't know if y'all was there with them, but I'm just saying, it should be a good place for people and not have to feel like they're scared.
Yeah. It's 7:22, so we've got 8 more minutes before we're going to wrap this up.
Okay, this question is specifically for Steve Resin. But just to give a little preface before, throughout the whole forum, we've kind of heard about the other 3 candidates, students in the program and their experiences. But I wanted to know what specifically qualifies you as a school board candidate.
That's a great question. I think that's really for voters to decide. I think the things that don't set me apart is that I don't have kids in the system. I'm not married yet. I decided I didn't want to wait for those things to be true before trying to change it and get it to somewhere I would want to send my kids. I think that I have the least experience as an administrator, clearly than my company here, and I think Christine and Betty are both extremely proficient administrators as well. I think the places that I have, skills that are not represented is I represent a Christian and conservative viewpoint that I don't think is represented on the board much. And I've got a background in technology specifically, and that's the one thing I would like to see added to the schools is a significant increase in technology programming classes. Like, we live in an ever-changing technology world. COVID last year taught us that in the school system itself. It's like people need to be proficient in the technology they're using, and especially as that continues, we're going to start giving up, like India, China, a lot of these other countries are going to catch up to us in technology and in the ability to take those jobs if we don't stay ahead of them. We've got clearly the best base to build from for education, but we have to keep pressing our advantage in order for that to really come to fruition. And in order for you guys to have good, high-paying jobs, you have to have skills.
My question is for Ms. Hagemeister. Do you believe that funding should be that more funding should be allocated for the school system for a variety of things? Some examples include lunches or better Wi-Fi.
Lunches or better Wi-Fi. I would say that your Wi-Fi, honestly, is stemmed by the restrictions to make sure that you're not accessing stuff you shouldn't access, quite honestly. It's not so much that there's not the technical capacity for it. It's, I think, And I could be wrong on that. Now that I say it, I could be wrong. I'm looking over here at Mr. Holmorn, not asking you to weigh in. You don't get a seat up here. Something that we could talk about. But part of it is to make sure that the uses that are being used, the technology that's being used at the schools is being used appropriately and educationally, and not to stream Netflix while you're in class, very frankly. Because I think that that's always going to be a balance, and that's something that is going to be a struggle. And also the fact that there's 1,600 students in a building at the same time is going to put a big demand on that. As far as school lunches are concerned, I think there's always room for conversation about what that looks like. Our school nutrition program is completely self-sustaining. It is a program that is always at work and always looking for ways to improve. This year, we are not immune to any of the problems that are happening across the nation as far as the supply chain is concerned. I don't know, there are students who love school lunch across the gamut. There are students who don't like it. I had 2 who didn't, and they've learned how to pack their lunches long, long ago. But I think that there are things that we can do to improve that, but also there's going to be limitations no matter what we do on that. So I think that it's exploring that. I'm excited for the kitchen expansion that's going to be happening at the central kitchen through our bond proposal and through the bond that the voters supported. I think that there will be improvements to our capacity at Central Kitchen once that environment is expanded and maybe modernized in some ways that will increase the capacity for us to do some of those things for nutrition. I'm just going to keep rolling through.
I love it. How you doing?
And I'm so sorry. I'm about to do the same thing. I did not catch your name. I'm so sorry. The one in the green at the end.
That's me.
What was your name again?
I'm Carla Hagemeister.
Hagemeister, gotcha. As I mentioned to her, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm Teresa Parks.
She mentioned rapport between the student, the teachers, and many believe, as somebody who's come from my mother, a teacher, and my family being around that, they have put in place for other things such as violence, school shootings, such like that, that there is a guide. Do you believe that there should be a guide towards how students interact with the kids towards bullying and what they should do to report this? And what would that guide look like?
I think that there's probably already some of those things in place. I think the question is, how are those things communicated to students? I think that's always the challenge for stuff, is that there's a lot of requirements for things to be available, but if it's not communicated, then it does. If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a noise? I think is part of the question. Is we can have all of the policies or plans in place, but if students don't know how to access those things, then are they really there? And so perhaps the question is a little bit more fine-tuned to how do we make sure that students know how to access those services, and then that those services are followed through with. I think that there's, again, if you don't know about those, then we need to do a better job of making sure that you do know about those. Whether it's taking things from, again, looking at how are we communicating them. Y'all are on Instagram. I'm stuck on Facebook as much as I want to get off of it. But is it that there's QR codes in the bathroom that connects to those policies for you, or to the form? Not even the policy, because even then the policies are sometimes hard to interpret, even for us. I've learned how to navigate the website. I can do it in a split second because I've had that experience and time to do it. But if your situation is a stressful situation and you're needing to figure out how do I navigate this, maybe it's a QR code. Maybe it's something that is more accessible and is in your language. Part of that is making sure that what we are communicating in a way that you guys are ready to hear it, and we're communicating in a language that you guys are using. Our students don't know always how to do emails because it's formalized communication. Well, that is a two-way street. Perhaps some of what needs to happen is we need to learn more about how to make sure we're communicating in a language that you guys understand. Both things are important. You're welcome.
And it is 7:29, so I think we're probably just going to wrap it up there.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks to all the candidates for coming, and thank you all for participating in the open mic. Again, I'm the editor-in-chief of the high school newspaper, and yeah, right.
Oh,
You
yeah.
are.
And then I'm the president of Young Republicans.
Yep. Deal.
Thank you guys
All
for
right,
having
thank
us.
you
Yes,
all for
thank you
having
so
us. Thank you
much.
guys for coming tonight.